Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
This is Amini Swedi and
Zulfa Kasim.
you're listening to the Murid Talks podcast.
Welcome again, everyone. I'm so glad to welcome you back again, all of you. I hope you're well and doing fine. How are you, Brother Amini?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. Sister Zulfa, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. So, we decided to spice things up this new year, and we're going to start with a verse in the Quran recited by Brother Amini and then translated by myself. And inshallah, we hope you will all enjoy and it will be wonderful.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد بعثنا في كل أمة رسولا أن اعبدوا الله واجتنبوا الطاغوت فمنهم من هدى الله ومنهم من حقت عليه الضلالة فسيروا في الأرض فانظروا كيف كان عاقبة المكذبين صدق الله العظيم.
For surely we sent a messenger to every community, saying, Worship Allah and shun false gods. But some of them were guided by Allah, while others were destined to stray. So travel throughout the land and see the fate of the deniers.
MashaAllah, Sister Zulfa, this is a very profound verse.
It is. It's kind of scary for most people, I think. For me personally, it was.
So yeah, what are we going to be discussing today, Sister Zulfa?
Today's topic will be about prophethood. And I think it's something that I personally had struggled with in the beginning. And I think most of us would like to know, at least in the Islamic perspective, what prophecy and prophethood really means, So, starting with who are prophets? How does one know that this is a prophet? And how will we differentiate, with false prophethoods or false inspirations that come from people's mouths? How do you say that this is not a crazy person? This person has God-revealed messages in him. So I let you explain.
So the reason that we recited this particular verse is that God tells us in this verse that he sent messengers to the communities. And it is believed in the Islamic creed and other creeds as well that each community, in a sense, received a prophet. And so a prophet is a person sent by God to a certain community. To do what exactly? And the verse tells us to tell the people to worship God and avoid falsehood or false gods, which come down to the same thing: falsehood, false gods. So, a prophet is a person sent by God with the revelation of the truth to worship God and avoid falsehood. Now, that helps us define prophethood, and prophethood is a mission towards teaching the community the truth, which is God, and to help this community avoid falsehood. Now, if you read the verse in Arabic, وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتِ, and avoid falsehood or false gods, it could also mean to avoid evil. Taghut can also translate to evil. So it's not only about theoretical knowledge, right? It's not just about the information and the philosophy and, the gnosis of knowing God, but also the practical life, doing good and avoiding falsehood, evil, bad deeds. So it is a total transformation of the community from falsehood to truth. And so that is prophethood, that mission. the mission of truth, the mission of goodness, might I say. Yeah.
That says a lot about humans, I think, that we're more inclined into falsehood, that we need some push for someone to come and tell us how to live. That's I don't know if it's a morbid way of thinking of it, but we're more inclined to it that we need someone to help us towards a better way of basically living, And I think this is why prophets are kind of special, because I used to ask myself, one of the pillars of faith we are told in our creed is to believe and to follow prophets. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's good, but I mean, what's so special about these people? So I think that's one of them, to guide us into better living in the best way, and that is to do good and to remove, as you say, evil, the best way we human beings can, under God's guidance, of course.
Yeah, and to connect a very biblical narrative, the narrative of the fall, right? The fact that humans were in an elevated position, with paradisial life, the Edenic state, biblical stories that we fell. And so the fall entails ignorance, the fall entails evil, the fall entails falsehood. And so in this particular life cycle, this dimension of life, we are in the abode of falsehood, and the abode of forgetfulness, and the abode of evil. And so we do need that push, right? And that's why the prophets and the messengers are identified as people who come to remind us of our true Edenic state, right? We were in a position of truth, then we fell. By falling, we need to be reminded. And the reminders are the prophets and the messengers. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Remind also, I've seen that word being used a lot, as the Prophet Muhammad been told by God several times in the Quran that you are only a reminder.
Exactly.
You're only there to tell people that what is the message and what is the truth. And the rest you leave it to us, which scares me, but but that's another day's topic.
Of course.
But how do you know that this person is a prophet? We have a lot of those going around. And of course, in the Islamic creed, Muhammad is the last prophet. So that reduces a lot of problems for us. But in most cases, there's still a lot of prophets going on. So how do you know when your roommate comes to you and tells you that, what, I got a revelation from God? I know this is not very funny sometimes, but how do you know that this person is truly the one sent by God?
This gets a little bit complicated because, first of all, we have to distinguish between prophethood and a prophet. So a prophet is a person who takes the mission of prophethood. So the pre-existing concept is prophethood. It's there, right? The fact that God sends prophets and messengers to the community is independent of who is sent to that community.
Okay.
Right? So that's the first thing. So you first have to believe in prophethood, to believe that God does actually send people to the community, right? Now, from there, we have to identify criterias for a person who can contend
as a prophet.
As a prophet. One, no one deserves that position. No one is deserving of being a prophet from the human perspective. Only God knows who deserves to be a prophet according to his criteria. So, one, a prophet doesn't, in a sense, choose to be a prophet. They are chosen to be a prophet. Now, obviously, if I come now and say I'm a prophet, I wouldn't say, I chose to be a prophet. I'd say God has chosen me to be a prophet. So we need other criteria apart from the statement that I've been chosen to be a prophet, because all prophets came to their people and said, I've been chosen to be a prophet. The number two, or maybe the number one after that number one, is character. All prophets had distinguished characters from their communities. They were the best, the quintessence purest of the pure, the creme de la creme of their communities.
They were the best examples.
They were the best examples. And even the Quran tells the Prophet Muhammad that we have sent you with the best of character. And when the wife of the Prophet, our mother Aisha, was asked, what was the character of the Prophet? She said it was the Quran. The Prophet was the living embodiment of that book. He lived according to the Quran. He was the walking, breathing Quran.
It was the message itself.
Exactly. And so, for example, we talk about Jesus in the Gospels. We talk about, Moses in the Torah. We talk about David in the Psalms. They were not just given the Psalms. They were the Psalms. They were the Torah. They were the Gospels. So when we're going to preach the Gospels, we're not just preaching a book and certain words. We are preaching Jesus. When we preach the Torah, we're not just preaching the words of the Torah. We're preaching Moses, his life, his being. And so to identify if a person is telling you the truth, you have to, first of all, identify that he has distinguished character. Like,
he cannot not be that.
He cannot not be. Like, this person is so pure that I will believe that God sent him. And to give you an example, the Prophet Muhammad, after he received prophethood from God, when he was, in the cave of Hira, he was told then to go to the people. Again, this is another distinguishing character. The prophets have to go to the people, right? They are sent to the community. It's a mission. So after he's, accepted it himself, because it's kind of a tremendous mission.
It's true.
Right? It's quite overwhelming. Like, okay, I'm a prophet. I've been sent by God to my community. He called his people and he asked them, if I were to tell you now that there is a person behind this mountain who's coming to attack you, will you believe me? And everybody in his community said yes. Like, you are truly one amongst the trustworthy. They used to call him Al-Amin, which means the most trustworthy. As-Sadiq al-Amin.
The truthful.
Right? The truthful, the most trustworthy. Right? He was kind of a bank, right? People would put money in his possession, in their belongings.
Yeah, mind you, even when they were having strife,
and that was after, right? They didn't believe in him, but still they'd put money in his hands because they know that he wouldn't take a single penny. Right? When people had problems before he was a prophet, they would go to Muhammad. Even when he was young, right? You wouldn't see him in evil gatherings. You wouldn't see him tell a lie. And this is attested by the people in his community. Like, right now we might say, I don't believe. It might be a lie.
I don't know.
But that's not exactly. Yeah. But that's not the point. The point is, did the people in his time actually accept that he had, the best of character? Yes, they did. And so when he asked them, if I tell you that there's a person behind the mountain coming to attack you, will you believe me? They said, yes. You truly are Sadiq al-Amin. You are the truthful, the trustworthy. Why wouldn't we believe? And then he said, but if I were to tell you now that I was sent by God, would you believe me? And then boom, a chasm. Some said, of course. Of course, it makes so much sense. There wouldn't be anybody apart from you who would be given this mission. And some are like, how could you, a child we've seen grow up, from nothing, be a prophet now and tell us that you were sent by God? Why not us?
No, even Jesus was being asked the same thing.
Exactly. Why you?
Yeah,
right?
Why you?
Why you? And the most interesting thing is that another character, in a sense, is that they're the most humble people. It's not about forcing you to accept them. It's not about them. It's not about me, Muhammad, I'm a prophet. No, I'm just saying I've been sent here with a message, and my job is to just give you the message. Whether you believe in me, Muhammad, it's not a big deal. The one who tells us to believe in Muhammad is God. It's not Muhammad himself. And the Quran tells us that they do not speak out of their own accord, but it's a revelation. They are told what to say.
They're compulsed.
They're compulsed. So character is very important. And this, I was kind of struggling with this myself. Like, what's the difference between the prophets and the madmen? I've God is talking to me and I'm a prophet,
yeah,
right?
psychic patients.
Exactly.
Always,
They're always proclaiming grandiose ideas,
yeah, I
right?
am God, I am this.
But here's the point. Before that, they never show signs of any grandiosity. And here's the part where humbleness comes in. They were always ordinary good men, right? Obviously distinguishable character, but normal human beings. They live, they eat, they breathe.
I think in such a way that they were good people to begin with. So a good person can't, for instance, lie to you that I'm not a prophet.
Yeah,
they've
never lied.
They've never lied.
Yeah.
Even I think prophethood really, now that I think of it, it keeps taking me back to the human nature.
Of course.
I mean, look at how, first of all, falsehood is something so obvious when it is next to truth, you know? Like, here is a prophet, a most distinguished human being, and here's someone who's just fumbling and hustling, you know? If you really have both of these on the table, you would see the difference. The falsehood is so clear cut. The truth is so different. These are two different things. And I think because the revelation is truly from God, as you're saying, when you're reading the Quran, you're not just reading the Quran, you're reading the Prophet, and you're not just you're not preaching the Prophet, you're preaching God.
Exactly.
It is a chain. It is as you say, it is a mission, and it is not about them. It's about the God who's above it.
It's a mission and a transmission.
A transmission.
Right.
I know, and this is why. Even there's a verse that says that there's no distinction. You know, all the prophets that came before till the last one, they will all be the same.
And that's another point. That, of course, the verse that we read in the beginning tells us that God sent these prophets to the community with one message: worship God and avoid falsehood, which could also equal know the truth and avoid falsehood, right? Because worshiping God equals knowing God. We've talked about this. And so the idea is that every prophet that came after the prophet before confirmed the prophet that came before, confirmed the message of the prophet that came before. And even the Prophet Muhammad said, yes, according to the Islamic creed, we believe that the Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet. And this is attested by people of many traditions, not just the Islamic tradition, that, Islam is kind of the last major world religion. And the idea is that the Prophet tells us, I didn't come here to change anything. I came here to confirm the prophets that came before and to complete the message. Jesus said the same thing. I didn't come to change the law of Moses, right? I didn't come to do that. That's not my point. Rather, to actually affirm what he was saying, And so all the prophets affirm the message of oneness, the message of God. That one true source, the ultimate source of everything. And so that's another very, very important point. And their message has always been a message of virtue. Be good to your neighbor. Do not do this, do not do that. Be good to your parents. Do not steal. So it's a unified, universal mission and message.
Okay.
You see, that's also another point.
It makes me feel really special, loved, and alone. I mean, God has mysterious ways of showing you that He's there. I've heard people say that God created us and left us here all on our own. Well, that's not true.
That's not true at all.
I mean, here He sends all these people, all these signs that I am here. And I did not throw you from heaven to leave you astray. I'm going to teach you how to be, how to live.
How to get back to me.
How to get back to me. And I used to think like, when someone say, I have a message, and you think it's this huge thing, like out of the ordinary. But no, the message is simple. Worship me. And how do you do that? Be good.
Exactly. Be human.
Be human. Exactly. Be tolerant with each other. Yeah. Be humble. And I used to think like, okay, a prophet, yeah, it's a good person, but why do I have to follow everything he's saying? But yes, if you follow him, you will know God and you will live well and you will be content and you will get back to the source of everything, contented, and him contented with you, you know? And so even Abraham, he's mentioned in the Quran that he was amongst the people with the best character, you know? And if you follow him, if you follow the prophet, you will know me, you will get to live well. And so I think this message is an important thing, that we forget and fight and squabble with all these distinctions that are going around. I know this is the prophet of the Jews, this is the prophet of Christians, or this is the prophet only for Muslims, but that's not the point.
That's not the point at all, actually.
The point is the message, it's the mission that they were just completing under his guidance. And so I wanted to ask the question, so who's right, you know? Who's who's better? But you clearly cut all those questions out.
But let's explore that a little bit, and let's go through a couple of verses in the Quran that kind of talk about, you know, this idea of distinction and which is the right path. Of course, the Quran does talk about, you know, inna dina inda Allahi al-Islam, that the religion in the sight of God is Islam. But the translation and the meaning of this particular verse is different for different people. Some take it to be the exact, you know, official, formal creed of Islam, but some say no. Islam here signifies the path of submission, the path of submitting to God and worshiping God, which is universal. It's not particular to the creed that came down with, you know, the Prophet Muhammad. And so let's read a couple of verses and see if they'll guide us to understand, you know, the prophecy of the different prophet or the prophethood of the different prophets, and if their messages are still valid. So I'll read a couple of verses in English and we'll see how it goes from there. So the first verse is from the second chapter, verse 285, which says, "The messenger believes in what has been sent down to him from his Lord." So what has been sent down to him, he believes it. He has to believe it first, right? As do the faithful. They all believe in God, his angels, his scriptures, and his messengers. And they say, "We make no distinction between any of his messengers. We hear and we obey. Grant us your forgiveness, our Lord. To you we all return." So that's the first verse. We, the faithful that believe in the Prophet Muhammad and the Prophet Muhammad himself, see no distinction amongst the prophets, the messengers of God. Another verse is the second chapter, verse 136, which says, "Say, we believe in God and in what has been revealed to us," right? To the Prophet Muhammad, the community of the Prophet Muhammad, us, "and in what has been revealed to Abraham and Ishmael and Isaac and Jacob and his children, and in what has been given to Moses and Jesus, and what has been given to the prophets from their Lord. We make no difference between any of them, and to him we submit ourselves." In Arabic, وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُسْلِمُونَ. We are all, you know, the ones submitting, yes. And so you see here that we believe in what has been sent to us, yes, the Quran, but also those messages that were sent to the other prophets, because there is no distinction. So what has been sent to Jesus and Moses and Abraham and Isaac. And this extends all the way to Buddha, for example, or Krishna, or, you know, Lao Tzu. All these, we believe in a sense that they are sages. And this is very important because, yes, there are a couple of prophets mentioned in the Quran, and it's believed to be around 25, some say 28. And the idea is that there are more prophets than this, and it's believed to be around 124,000 or 125,000. But that's not really the point. The point is that there's a lot of prophets from other communities that we might not know the names of. The prophet mentioned in the Quran are the prophets from the kind of the Middle Eastern area. So the Hebraic prophets and the prophets from the Arabian Peninsula, Ishmael, Muhammad, Jesus from the Hebraic community, etc., etc. So again, that's another important point. Another verse, very interestingly, is 5:48, which says, "We have sent down to you the book with truth, confirming the book before it, and a protector for it. So judge between them according to what God has sent down, and do not follow their desires against the truth that has come to you. For each of you we have made a law and a method." A law and a method, or you might say a rite, a ritual. Had God willed, he would have made you a single community of people. But he did not, so that he may test you in what he has given to you. Strive then to excel each other in good deeds. To God is the return for all of you. Then God shall tell you about that in which you disputed. Another one that's very much connected that says, "For every community we have appointed rites, methods, which they perform. So, O Muhammad, let them not contend with you over the matter, but invite them to your Lord. Indeed, you are upon straight guidance." Back to you, Sister Zulfa.
Okay, so we human beings are really messed up.
We are. Yeah.
Why I'm saying this, because it sounds to me our biggest problem is the differences that we have in our communities. That I'm different from a Chinese, I'm different from an American, I'm different from a fellow Tanzanian who has a different culture, Our differences is what makes us think that we're completely incompatible. These things are different. But as it says, that each one has their own method. So Moses was the right person at the time and the place that he was, to be how he was, and to have the message that he had. It's not
for his people.
For his people. They were in a difficult position that needed a certain way of going into it, and only God knows it. And that's why he's the one who's in control of all this. Because if that was in a human's hand, we would have been gone by now. Our species would have been extinct. But this blessing that God has mentioned also in the books, that we are only different races and colors and languages so that you get to know each other, is also our curse. That we cannot stand that someone else is different from you and what they're saying could be the truth. And it's both painful, but it's a good understanding that all ways, as long as they're going back to God, all paths are right.
Of course.
So if you're taking the Buddha's way, if it is truly the Buddha's way, that is the right path for you. If that's how you get to understand your God well, and it is inspired into you, that is the right path to take. All these paths, they lead to goodness. They lead to justice and mercy. That's the point. That's the message. But we are all here running around trying to look at differences. It's killing me. I just feel so angry at the same time.
And that's the most important thing, that strive in doing that which is good. And so, again, we go back to your question, how do we tell that those figures that people call prophets are prophets? And how do we then say that this person is not a prophet? It's the idea of that message. And the message is truth, God, good, and the method is very important. These two verses mention method, the rituals. These are ways of preparing us for that truth, right? We're vessels, but then we have to be cleansed. We have to be kind of purified.
Furnished enough to be presented to the majesty.
Now, we have to be molded so that the truth can be revealed unto us, or we can remember the truth because it's always been there. And so it's a matter of us be, reminded of it. And so you study Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and many other religions and traditions that we are not familiar with. As long as they're God revealed, and this is how you find their connection, they will teach you about your source. That's the first thing. Worship God. Right? And worshiping God here means, again, it's very important, knowing God. Right? Taking you back to your source. Gnosis. But the other thing is to teach you to be good. How to live.
Simple as that.
As simple as that. How to live with your fellow human being. How to live with the other. How to be compassionate.
How to live with yourself.
How to live with yourself. How to be kind and compassionate to yourself. And this includes all facets of life, from how you eat, to how you sleep, to how you talk, to how you treat your body, to how, you rest, to how you communicate, right? It's not just about, I've prayed 5 times a day and I've fasted, or I'm a Muslim. No. If you are, being full, right? You eat and you're full, and then your neighbor is dying out of hunger, and then you pray 5 times a day.
What's the point?
What's the point? Because that prayer was supposed to teach you to be kind to your neighbor. And that's the point of rituals. We've talked about this in, previous episodes. So, again, the prophets, the sages, the messengers, different terms depending on the tradition that you choose, have always been what in the Islamic tradition is called the insan al-kamil, the perfect human. Not angels. No. The perfect human. And I want to read a verse that's very important. Today we've been going back to verses, which is very important. People, ask this question, like, why are the prophets human? Why would God send a human, right? And humans imperfect? Right? We have our imperfections, And contrary to what people might think, even prophet had the imperfections. But of course, we believe in Islam the prophets didn't sin. They didn't do sin. But they had imperfections. The fact that you have to sleep in itself is an imperfection. You could stay awake then for,
I hear Moses was having anger management.
Yeah, according to the Quran, Moses had, anger fits, and those are small imperfections, but they didn't sin. They didn't do sin because God guided them not to. But then people ask, why humans? And this is very important because God says in the chapter of the prophets, it's called Surah Al-Anbiya, the chapter of the prophets. It's a very interesting surah. I really recommend people go read that chapter. It's the 21st chapter of the Quran, which says, I'm going to read from verse 3, with their hearts distracted, the people that, receive the messengers and prophets, and those who do wrong conceal their private conversation. So these people, they have certain private conversations, and they conceal them. What do they say in these conversations? They say, is this, the prophet, except a human being like you? He's a human being. How can he be a prophet, right? So would you approach magic while you are aware of it? And so we believe that prophets did miraculous things. And so in a way of kind of fighting and rebattling against them, the people of the community, some people who disbelieve, they say, these guys are magicians. Right? And so will you believe these magicians? Right? The fact that magicians, even back then, were seen as bad people, right? And this is very interesting, that because magicians have been associated with bad people, and people know according to their essential nature what bad is, even if they do it.
It's trickery.
Right? They're like, these people. And so they have to defame the prophets to make people not believe in them. You see this? Because these people are good. They knew that these people are good. So how do we take people away from seeing their goodness? Because then they will believe that they're prophets. Because of their goodness, we have to defame them. By what? Pushing bad onto them. And one of them is magic. These guys are magicians. They're doing trickery. And will you believe in them? And then the prophet says, my Lord knows whatever is said throughout the heaven and earth. And he is the hearing and the knowing. And so it doesn't matter what you say. God knows all that you say. But they say, the revelation is but a mixture of false dreams, Rather, he has invented it. Rather, he is a poet. So let them bring us a sign just as the previous messengers were sent. So, like, yeah, you have invented it, or it's some mumble jumble dreams like the as
You're
we were
mad.
talking. Yeah, you're mad, basically, or you're just a fancy poet. And so we want proof. Tell us, how are you a prophet? But then God says, not a single city which we destroyed believed before them. So will they believe? Like God says, it's not a. Some people disbelieved before you, and we destroyed them. Will you believe? See?
It's like it's nothing new. We've
Yeah,
heard
it's
this
nothing new.
before.
We've heard this before, right?
You know what I like about the Quran and is how God is so, personal. He doesn't really go away from what human beings actually are.
Exactly.
I mean, he's telling you, like, I know there are people questioning you, and there are people before who said things like this. So you chill.
Exactly.
I'm gonna do this for you, you know?
And so, just to finish up on these verses, God then says, "And we sent not before you, O Muhammad, except men to whom we revealed the message." So they're human beings just like you. And that's not something. Let it not worry you that they are,
They don't believe you.
that they don't
or-
believe you because you're a man.
Mhm.
And that's one thing that people are like, why didn't God send angels? Why would he send you, Muhammad? Yeah, you're trustworthy, you're a good person, but why you?
That's
God,
quite envious.
then God says, we have always sent men. So ask the people. People know, and people knew of these traditions before them. There were Christians in the community even before the prophet became a prophet.
Yeah, even Muhammad was predicted to come, as a prophet. The Jews knew that there was a coming prophet. But when he showed up, we were like, nah, not you.
Exactly. You can't be the
You
one.
can't be. But I think for me at least, what I get out of all this is that, it's at the end of the day, it's not about us.
Of course.
It's really not. Everything has been there and God has accounted for. And at the end of the day, the message is the important thing. And the message isn't anything dramatic or far from being good and worshiping Him,
Exactly.
which vis-a-vis means knowing Him. And sometimes I think God has gone through a lot of trouble for people to get to know Him. But it is also to testify His greatness, I mean, it couldn't have been any other way. I used to question, like, why do we have to have people show up, tell you that, God tells me to tell you this? Why don't you just inspire it in me? But that won't be God's nature. I mean, He has to owe you something, surprise you. And it surprises me more of the human nature. And it makes me feel even more humble because, as we mentioned in the first verse that we started with, that in the process, God led others astray and He guided others. So we are, in a way, if you come to a point that you feel like you're starting to believe first in prophethood and then get to one or two of them whom you attenuate more, it's a blessing. And you're not mad, and the questions that you're having or we were having, they're not new. They have been asked before. I mean, why him? Where are the signs? Why not an angel? And the message isn't different, isn't any other, but the same thing, So we're all seeking, we're all headed in the same direction, just different paths. And they're all right. At least that's for me.
Yeah, just to kind of sum up with an anecdote, in a sense. This question of why that particular person, why Jesus, or why Muhammad, or why Moses, why Noah, why not somebody else from the community? It's so simple. God chooses whom He wills. And there's a verse that God says, God knows where to put His message. He doesn't need to ask you for
like
permission.
A boss.
Yeah, He's like a boss. He is the boss, no? But just let's go back to real life. Not that prophethood isn't real life, but let's go to our everyday life. You look at somebody like Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest boxers, in history.
great, one of the most amazing characters I've ever experienced.
Right? A poet, a philosopher, a boxer. Why him?
Hmm.
You look at somebody like Michael Jackson, one of the greatest musicians in history. You look at somebody like Serena Williams, one of the best tennis players in history. You look at somebody like, Ronaldinho, one of the best footballers in history.
Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa, one of the most
Mandela.
kind, Mandela, all these people. You look at Malcolm X. Why them? Why Malcolm X? And this is the most important thing. Let's just distinguish the greatness from that individual. The individual is there to carry that greatness.
That's all.
He's a conduit, a vessel. And so the prophets were the vessels of wisdom. What Ibn Arabi says, fusus al-hikam, the bezels of wisdom. They carry the wisdom. And so they, like all these great athletes and great people and great activists, are just conduits. Conduits of what? The truth. And as you said, it doesn't really matter. Because ultimately, what matters is God. God and the truth. And all greatness is His, whether it be an athlete's greatness or a teacher's greatness,
or
the
your
prophets.
personal greatness. Yeah, it's true.
So I think we should end the episode here.
Inshallah.
It was a great episode, Sister Zulfa.
It was.
Mashallah, mashallah.
Thank you, everyone who bared with us till the end. And I'm so glad to welcome you all again. And we wish you a wonderful day. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.